Now joining us is SABC News economics editor Tshepo Mongoai to also weigh in on the passing of former Labour Minister Membathisi Mdladlana. Tshepo, a very good afternoon to you. I suppose it's just bad news this week, bad news upon bad news. Yeah. Another former Labour minister, one of the first Labour ministers under, of course, our democratic dispensation, has also passed away. Let's talk about the contributions that he actually accorded the country from moving from the treacherous waters of apartheid to 30 years of democracy.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because he came immediately after Tito Mboweni. And remember, Tito Mboweni was quite instrumental in terms of policy formulation, particularly policies that protected vulnerable workers. And we've seen a lot of traction in that. But I think Membathisi Mdladlana's role came in terms of implementation and seeing that if what had been envisaged by the new government was practical, but also at the same time it was after that honeymoon was over, especially among the working class, when the working class was starting to ask questions in terms of what does this new dispensation mean to us, where in terms of transforming our livelihoods. And you could see that even some within the labor unions were starting to say, you know, you could do better in terms of transforming the economy, but also transforming the workplace. Employment equity was the buzzword at the time, and I remember in many of his presentations where he was presenting that report from the Employment Equity Commission about the level of transformation, and I remember vividly in one of the presentations he said, well, if these JSE listed companies do not want to transform, people will take to the street and will force them to transform. You could actually take that presentation that he did, and it will be so relevant even today, because the issues that were raised then by Membathisi Mdladlana are still quite,
and that's exactly the issue
we are dealing with. The other issue was BEE. He also presided over, as the minister, of course, there were a lot of BEE deals. People who have done exceptionally well today, they've managed to cut their teeth in terms of benefiting from some of the deals that were announced at the time. And obviously BEE, it came under a lot of criticism as empowering those who were aligned to the ruling party at the time. And of course, you know, not everyone was happy with that, but it was trial and errors. There were some mistakes, and of course it went through different stages and different phases in terms of fine-tuning what BEE is becoming, broad-based black economic empowerment, because at the time it was just about those who were available and were willing and could stand up and benefit from those deals. And obviously companies looked for those who they think can help them, you know, in one way or another. So they tend to go for those who are in power, or aligned to those who are in power. So he also, I mean, was vocal about the abuses, especially that were happening in the farming communities, and he played a major role to ensure that those labor inspectors go out there and actually, you know, expose some of unfair labor practices that were happening.
Looking at those policies and you know, the follow through in terms of implementation, Tshepo, I think you made mention to it around the fact that if we actually looked at some of those policies that he was part of drafting, we wouldn't have such a high unemployment rate in the country. The country would not be in such a dire economic state. So maybe it is time that we revisit some of those policies and ethics that were actually instilled by leaders like Membathisi Mdladlana.
No, absolutely. You'll remember that he came under attack from the private sector, but also from the those who represented the minority, especially our white people in South Africa, because of the affirmative action. And there was a kind of a pushback, especially in business, in terms of some of the policies that were invested, especially around transformation. So he actually received a lot of attacks on transformation, and the slow pace also was as a result of that resistance that happened, because it was almost like you're taking away from the minority and giving it to the majority. Although later on, there was some kind of understanding and acceptance that this is not a bad idea as such. If we really need to move as society, we have to transform. But at the time when affirmative action was introduced, I must tell you, it was during his time, and he fought a lot. But that's the part of the reason why we are still struggling with that, is because of transformation, but also because of other issues that have emerged as a result. Policies that were envisaged, there was a very clear objectives in terms of what they wanted to do. I think primarily was to protect the workers, particularly the vulnerable workers, and that's what you had a number of policies that were passed. Basic Condition of Employment Act, for example, but there was also policies around BEE that now the focus moved to how do we transform the economy, which became quite topical, and it's still a major issue even today that we are still grappling with in terms of transformation. There's been a lot of pieces of legislation that have been amended, that have been passed in addition in order to transform the economy.
Wow, Tshepho, talking of that willingness, I mean, a lot of, somebody was asking about the fact that, the quality of leadership that we're currently losing now. Do we even have such currently to lead us into the future? But unfortunately, we're out of time. Tshepho, thank you so much for joining us. That is SABC News economics editor Tshepo Mongoai in studio with us, also weighing in on the passing of former Labour Minister Membathisi Mdladlana. Let's take a quick ad break. More news after.